At exactly 4:20 p.m. Eastern Time today, January 10th, 2026, a federal judge did something that has never happened in the 249-year history of the United States. Judge Tanya Chutkan formally referred criminal conduct by a former president directly to Congress and demanded immediate impeachment proceedings. Let me say that again so it lands properly. A sitting federal judge looked at the evidence in front of her 14 documented violations of court orders, witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and concluded that Congress could no longer wait. This isn't speculation. This isn't anonymous sourcing. This is a 47-page legal document filed in federal court available to the public right now. And in approximately 72 hours, the House of Representatives will vote on whether Donald Trump becomes the first president in American history to be impeached 3 times. I've been covering this story for months. I warned you this was coming. I told you that judges would eventually stop tolerating the obstruction, that the machinery of accountability would start moving. Today, it moved. Let me walk you through exactly what happened, what it means, and what comes next. So, let's establish exactly what occurred today, because the details matter. Judge Tanya Chutkan presides over one of the federal criminal cases against Donald Trump. For months, she has been dealing with something no federal judge has ever faced at this scale. A defendant who simply refuses to follow court orders, gag orders violated, witnesses contacted despite explicit prohibitions, social media attacks on prosecutors, judges, and potential jurors. Not once, not twice. 14 documented times in just 3 months. Each time the court issued warnings, contempt citations, fines, and each time the behavior continued. Today, Judge Chutkan stopped asking. She filed what's called a formal criminal referral. Think of it as a judge officially telling Congress, I have exhausted my options. This defendant is so dangerous to the administration of justice that you need to act now. The language in the referral is worth reading directly. Quote, the defendant's repeated violations constitute a clear and present danger to the administration of justice and demand immediate congressional intervention. Clear and present danger. That's not judicial rhetoric. That's a legal conclusion with enormous weight. And she didn't just send a summary. She sent the entire evidentiary record. 14 gag order violations, each one time-stamped, screenshotted, archived. Transcripts from 7 separate contempt hearings where Trump was warned directly. Phone records showing coordination with co-defendants despite court-ordered no-contact restrictions. Social media posts targeting prosecutors, judges, and members of the jury pool. Internal communications from Trump's own legal team acknowledging the violations. Sworn declarations from former federal judges calling the conduct unprecedented. And then the most damaging piece of all recorded conversations, audio of Trump discussing plans to defy court orders with close advisors, evidence that doesn't just show behavior. It establishes intent. This is the kind of evidence that ends careers, that ends administrations, that ends political movements. And it was all handed to Congress in a single 47-page document. Now here's what makes this historically significant. This has never happened before. Not during Watergate when Nixon was fighting subpoenas. Not during the Clinton impeachment when obstruction was alleged. Not during the Saturday Night Massacre when Nixon fired special prosecutors. Never has a sitting federal judge formally initiated impeachment proceedings against a president or former president. Judge Chutkan crossed a line that no judge has ever crossed because she concluded that the conduct left her no choice. And Congress was not caught off guard. To understand why Judge Chutkan took this extraordinary step, you need to understand how federal courts actually work. Judges have limited tools. When a defendant violates a court order, the judge can issue warnings, impose fines, hold them in contempt, or in extreme cases, revoke bail. But what happens when none of that works? What happens when a defendant is wealthy enough that fines don't matter, powerful enough that jail seems politically impossible, and defiant enough that warnings are ignored? That's the trap Judge Chutkan has been in for months. Each violation escalated the stakes. Each contempt citation that didn't change behavior made the court look weaker, and Trump, whether by instinct or strategy, kept pushing. He attacked prosecutors by name. He posted about witnesses in active criminal cases. He shared information that could influence jury pools. He coordinated with co-defendants. He was legally prohibited from contacting. And when warned, He did it again and again and again. This is what systematic obstruction looks like. Not one bad decision, not one angry post. A pattern deliberate, repeated, documented. And here's the critical point most people miss. A judge's authority depends on enforcement. If orders can be violated without consequence, they become meaningless. If one defendant can ignore the court repeatedly, the entire system weakens. Judge Chutkan understood that her continued tolerance was damaging the judiciary itself. Every unpunished violation sent a message not just to Trump, but to every defendant in every federal courtroom. Follow the rules or don't. It doesn't matter. That's why she escalated. The criminal referral isn't about politics. It's about institutional survival. It's a federal judge saying, I cannot fix this alone. The conduct is too dangerous. Congress has the power I don't have. Use it. This matters because it changes the frame entirely. Trump's defense has always been that this is political persecution, partisan prosecutors, Obama-appointed judges, deep state conspiracies. But that defense collapses when the person making the accusation is a lifetime-appointed federal judge acting on documented evidence under oath. Judge Chutkan didn't leak to reporters. She didn't give interviews. She filed a formal legal document in open court, attached the evidence, and transmitted it through official channels. That's not persecution. That's procedure. And now Congress has to respond. Within hours of Judge Chutkan's referral, Congress moved faster than anyone expected. Articles of impeachment had actually been drafted months ago, sitting quietly in committee since November 2025. 8 specific charges: obstruction of justice, witness tampering, contempt of court, violation of judicial orders, abuse of power, conduct unbecoming a public official, threat to the constitutional order, and incitement. Until today, those articles had about 87 co-sponsors, all Democrats, not enough to pass. As of this evening, that number has exploded to 231. That's a majority of the House of Representatives. That's enough votes to impeach immediately. And here's what's remarkable. The new names aren't progressive Democrats from safe blue districts. They're moderate Republicans from swing districts who had defended Trump through 2 previous impeachments. Representative Mike Lawler of New York held a press conference this morning. A Republican from a district Biden carried. Listen to what he said. Quote, I swore an oath to the Constitution, not to any individual. When a federal judge says a former president is obstructing justice, I have a duty to take that seriously. Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska, another Republican, another defection. The political calculus has shifted overnight and Democratic leadership isn't waiting. They've invoked something called Rule 99, Section 2, a fast-track procedure that mandates a full House vote within 72 hours. That motion was filed this morning, which means by Monday, January 13th at the latest, the House of Representatives will vote on whether to impeach Donald Trump for the 3rd time. 72 hours. That's the window. With 231 co-sponsors already committed, the math is unforgiving. Impeachment is no longer a question of if, it's a question of margin. Will it be narrow 218 to 217, or will it become a landslide as more Republicans break ranks over the weekend? Because that list is growing by the hour. Moderate Republicans who were waiting for political cover are now abandoning ship. They see a federal judge's criminal referral. They see documented evidence of obstruction. They hear constituents exhausted by constant chaos, and they understand that they cannot go on national television defending witness tampering after a respected judge has signed her name to a 47-page referral. The political ground has shifted beneath the Republican Party, and Trump's response has made everything worse. Since yesterday afternoon, he has been posting constantly on Truth Social, all-caps tirades about rigged courts, attacks on what he calls Obama judges, claims of political persecution, conspiracy theories. But then came one post that immediately set off alarm bells across Washington. Quote, if Congress moves forward with this witch hunt, patriots must converge on Washington. The Second Amendment exists for moments like this. Read that again. A former president openly calling for armed resistance to Congress. That is not campaign rhetoric. That is not political posturing. Law enforcement is treating it as a threat. Every post he makes now becomes evidence. Every escalation strengthens the case against him. He is making the prosecution's argument for them in real time. and Washington has responded accordingly. National Guard units are deployed across the Capitol complex. Steel barricades are rising around federal buildings. Pro-Trump demonstrators are gathering near the National Mall. Counter-protesters demanding accountability are assembling near the Supreme Court. Law enforcement is everywhere. This is what the Capitol looks like right now. Not because of an election, not because of a foreign threat, because a former president is facing impeachment and has called for armed resistance. Most coverage right now is focused on the impeachment vote. Will it pass? How many Republicans will defect? What happens in the Senate? Those are important questions, but they're not the most important ones. Here's what most people are missing. Judge Chutkan's referral didn't just go to Congress. The evidence of witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and criminal contempt has also been forwarded to the Department of Justice. That means this isn't just a political process anymore. It's a parallel criminal investigation. If federal prosecutors establish that Trump directly coordinated with witnesses to influence testimony, that's subordination of perjury, a serious federal offense. Witness tampering carries significant prison exposure. So does obstruction of justice. Multiple federal grand juries are already active in Washington, D.C., Miami, and Atlanta. It is entirely plausible that new criminal indictments arrive while Senate impeachment proceedings are still underway. Think about that. We could be watching a Senate trial while a federal grand jury simultaneously hands down new charges. This is constitutional territory the framers anticipated, but hoped would never be tested. Multiple accountability mechanisms operating simultaneously. Impeachment in the House, trial in the Senate, federal criminal prosecution in the courts, and then there's something else barely being discussed publicly. Reports indicate that quiet conversations about the 25th Amendment have already begun. The 25th Amendment allows for removal without impeachment if a president is deemed unable to discharge the duties of office. It requires the vice president and a majority of the cabinet. It can move quickly overnight if necessary. The fact that this option is even being discussed tells you how severe officials believe this situation has become. Now, let me be clear. I'm not predicting that the 25th Amendment will be invoked. I'm telling you that it's being discussed and that discussion itself is historically significant. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is fracturing in real time. You have loyalists like Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz doubling down, calling for protests, defending Trump without reservation, attacking any Republican who breaks ranks. And you have pragmatists like Lawler and Bacon breaking away, citing their oaths to the Constitution. Internal threats are escalating. Lawmakers who defected are facing harassment from Trump's base. The party itself is tearing apart. With the 2026 midterms just 10 months away, many Republicans see electoral catastrophe ahead if they remain tied to this level of chaos. They're calculating, they're hedging, they're preparing exit strategies. That's the deeper layer here. This isn't just about one impeachment vote. It's about the collapse of a political coalition that has dominated Republican politics for nearly a decade. Once members publicly defect, the dam doesn't reseal. It breaks. Every new defection makes the next one easier, and internationally the consequences are already visible. A former American president threatening armed resistance while facing impeachment is not a normal headline. Our allies are alarmed. Our adversaries are watching closely, assessing instability, probing for weakness. Domestic turmoil always carries global consequences. And right now, to the rest of the world, the United States looks deeply unstable. Let's talk about what this means for ordinary people. Not politicians, not lawyers, regular Americans trying to understand what's happening to their country. First, the economy. Markets hate uncertainty, and there is nothing more uncertain than a constitutional crisis unfolding in real time. Futures markets are already reacting. International investors are watching. When the world's largest economy looks politically unstable, money moves. Interest rates can shift. Supply chains can tighten. Hiring decisions get delayed. None of this is guaranteed, but all of it becomes more likely when the political system is consumed by crisis. Second, trust. This is harder to measure, but maybe more important. How do you explain to your children what's happening right now? A former president calling for armed resistance. National Guard troops surrounding the Capitol. A federal judge concluding that obstruction of justice has become so severe that Congress must act immediately. This damage is something that's hard to rebuild. Faith in institutions, belief that the system works, trust that disagreements can be resolved through process rather than force. Every generation of Americans has to decide whether the Constitution is just words on paper or something that actually constrains power. This is one of those moments. Third, safety. Law enforcement isn't deploying the National Guard as a precaution. They're deploying it because they believe the threat is real. The memory of January 6th isn't abstract. It's operational. Agencies know exactly what happens when rhetoric turns to action. They watched a mob attack the Capitol in real time. They are determined not to be caught off guard again. For people in Washington right now, federal employees, Capitol staff, families living near government buildings, the next 72 hours will be tense. Security checkpoints, street closures, helicopter noise through the night. That's the human reality of constitutional crisis. It's not just cable news drama. It's people canceling plans, keeping children home from school, wondering whether their commute will be safe. And fourth, the future. Whatever happens Monday, the political landscape has permanently changed. If Trump is impeached for the third time, he becomes a historical figure unlike any other, defined not by policy accomplishments, but by repeated accountability proceedings. If he's somehow acquitted in the Senate, he remains politically viable but legally exposed, with federal criminal cases continuing regardless of congressional votes. Either way, the next few years will be consumed by trials, appeals, investigations, and ongoing instability. There's no path back to normal from here, only forward through whatever comes next. So, what are the possible scenarios from this point forward? Let me lay out what the next few weeks could look like, not as predictions, but as genuine possibilities based on what we know right now. Scenario 1. Impeachment passes. Senate convicts. This requires all Democrats plus at least 18 Republicans in the Senate. That's a high bar, but it's not impossible, especially if more evidence emerges during a Senate trial, or if Trump continues escalating his rhetoric in ways that make him impossible to defend. If conviction happens, Trump would be permanently barred from holding federal office again. His political career would be over in a legal constitutional sense. Scenario 2. Impeachment passes, Senate acquits. This is perhaps the most likely outcome based on historical patterns. The House impeaches, the Senate holds a trial, but 67 votes for conviction don't materialize. In this scenario, Trump survives legally, but is severely weakened politically. The evidence presented during trial becomes permanent public record. Republican senators who voted to acquit face that vote in every future campaign. Scenario 3. The 25th Amendment is invoked. This would be faster than a Senate trial, potentially overnight. It requires Vice President Vance and a majority of the cabinet to conclude that Trump is unfit. It's being discussed. Whether it actually happens depends on factors we can't see from the outside, but the mere fact that it's on the table shows how unstable the situation is perceived to be. Scenario 4. Additional criminal indictments. Independent of Congress, federal prosecutors continue their work. New charges could arrive at any time: witness tampering, obstruction, criminal contempt. This would create the unprecedented situation of a former president facing active criminal prosecution while simultaneously undergoing congressional impeachment proceedings. None of these scenarios are mutually exclusive. Several could happen simultaneously, and that's perhaps the most important point. Trump is not facing one threat. He's facing multiple threats converging at once: congressional, judicial, criminal, and political. The next 72 hours will determine which of these paths becomes reality. Before I close, let me give you the 3 things you need to remember from everything we've covered. 1. A federal judge has formally referred criminal conduct to Congress for the first time in American history. This is not politics. This is a lifetime appointed judge acting on documented evidence of obstruction and witness tampering. 2. The House will vote on impeachment by Monday. With 231 co-sponsors already committed, passage is virtually certain. The question is margin, and whether more Republicans break ranks over the weekend. 3. This is bigger than impeachment. Criminal investigations continue. The 25th Amendment is being discussed. The Republican Party is fracturing. and the next 72 hours will shape presidential accountability for generations. I'll be covering this story as it develops. If this breakdown helped you understand what's actually happening beyond the headlines and cable news panic, consider subscribing. I try to do what I've done today: take complicated situations, explain them clearly, and help you think through what comes next. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you think Congress should do. Tell me what you think happens Monday. This is one of those moments where being informed actually matters. I'll see you in the next